Before anything, just let me tell you to not skip parts of this video, because in terms of detail and information, you're in for a very good ride. I'm pretty sure that you've been seeing around the internet for the past couple of days benchmarks of Windows 11 24.2 versus the current Windows 11 23.2, proclaiming huge performance increases. And I am also sure that several people are jumping in the bandwagon and going to Windows 11 24.2, but let me tell you that you shouldn't be upgrading right now to Windows 11 24.2, because it does have some issues, some quality of life issues, and some others that we'll talk about later, of course. And as I stated on my community tab that I would also be benchmarking several games in several scenarios, and the reason that I took so long is this was a pain in the ass, really annoying to test. There were several times where I was mind blown, and there were others where I just wanted to punch the monitor and kick the computer, but those were the moments that actually led to some very interesting results. So today I'm testing 28 games with the RX 7900 XTX instead of the RTX 4090 Super that everyone is using, of course, testing the Ryzen 7 5800X 3D Zen 3 versus Ryzen 9 7900X 3D, Zen 4 versus Ryzen 9 9900X Zen 5. This of course in order to have several architectures and layouts in the same video. And the Windows installations are also clean install versus clean install for the Ryzen 9 CPUs, and an installation with a couple of weeks versus the new updated branch prediction on the same installation for the 5800X 3D. And also, if you want to know, virtualization is disabled in every single test that I make, but Windows 11 24.2 did bring some newer options, so I also disabled local security authority protection to make sure it wasn't interfering with the performance gains. And now that you got all the details, let's finally go to the benchmarks. Starting with World War Z, we have some odd results. And as stated before, the 7900X 3D and 9900X are going clean installation versus clean installation. Almost as clean as the prices of today's sponsor, GVG Mall! Bringing you lots of software deals like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2019 or 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and for all of these you can use my SKG discount code for 30% off, getting a Windows 11 serial key for $22 and a Windows 10 one for only $15. Then use the key on your Windows settings and you'll have an activated system. So 7900X 3D and 9900X, clean installation versus clean installation, basically Windows installed from scratch, while the 5800X 3D is only with Windows 11 23.2 before and after the backported update that should, in theory, according to AMD and Microsoft, deliver very close results to those of the 24H2. But here we have kind of a mixed bag, with both the 5800X 3D and 7900X 3D having higher 1% lows, but with the Zen 4 CPU having lower averages and the Zen 5 one kind of having higher averages but lower 1% lows, which is kind of messed up. In Tale Requiem we're now testing in a village area where things get a bit more CPU bound, and we now see the better CPU delivering better results, with the 9900X for example delivering 3% more FPS on average than the 7900X 3D, but 8% more 1% lows. As for the update, the difference is quite small, but all CPUs benefit from it. And Counter-Strike 2 is the first game where we see some real differences from the branch prediction updates. Oddly, both the 7900X 3D and 5800X 3D had virtually the same FPS numbers, but the 9900X got a very nice increase from 548 average FPS to 598, representing a 9% increase. And I tested this several times, by the way, and still had the same results. As for Cyberpunk 2077, I also changed the benchmark to the middle of the city in order to stress the CPU a bit more. And you can see the 5800X 3D delivering more FPS somehow, and I believe that is because I forgot to change the field of view from 80 to 90, and that does affect the FPS values. As for the update, the 5800X 3D got exactly the same FPS, while both the 7900X 3D and 9900X got a 5% performance increase, which is actually pretty decent for a software update. And the same happened with Spider-Man Remastered, where both the 5800X 3D and 9900X got a slight performance increase, with the 7900X 3D getting slightly lower performance somehow. And you may think that these results were margin of error, but as soon as we tested ray tracing, they went exactly the same way, with the 9900X gaining FPS and the 7900X 3D losing a bit of those. And that also applies to Starfield, where the 7900X 3D has once again a slight performance decrease with a new update. And this was retested several times, by the way, still with the same results, sadly. As we move to The Last of Us though, things change, and now the 9900X is the fastest CPU here, and I suppose that's because of the new architectural improvements, as even without 3D cache, it is 8% faster than the 7900X 3D and 19% faster than the 5800X 3D. In terms of branch prediction updates, well, the 9900X seems to be the only CPU benefiting here. Alan Wake 2 is a really GPU-heavy title, even when running at 1080p high settings, and I wanted to know if the update would deliver higher 1% lows in GPU-bound scenarios. But it seems that in this game the update did absolutely nothing, but a clean installation of Windows 11 24/2 was consistently delivering slightly lower results, and I don't know why, but it happened to me every single time. As for The Witcher 3, I made a test running around Novigrad and even used FSR2 quality to really punish the CPU. And the new branch prediction update did improve the performance slightly across the board, with the biggest gains being with the 9900X in terms of averages that went from being slightly slower than the 7900X 3D to virtually matching it. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, on the other hand, didn't show any real improvements in terms of average FPS, but the new update did bring slightly better 1% lows across the board. Of course, we're talking about a maximum of a 3% increase, but better performance is better performance. And since we were testing so many of the X12 titles, I decided to test Assassin's Creed Origins to kind of balance the scales, and the results were once again odd, with the 7900X 3D losing average FPS but getting increased 1% lows, and the 9900X getting slightly better performance, while the 5800X 3D stayed exactly the same with just the update, like I said, odd. Microsoft Flight Simulator, on the other hand, delivers very stable results, with both the 5800X 3D and 9900X getting a 2% boost in the averages that could be considered as margin of error, and the 7900X 3D getting better 1% lows compared to the same test with Windows 11 23/2. And now we finally have some more juicy content with the Riftbreaker. I was already ready to sleep with the past 5 results, but with Riftbreaker things got interesting, with the 3 CPUs from 3 different generations getting a performance uplift in both averages and 1% lows, and the 9900X going from 217 to 239 average FPS, which translates into a 10% uplift, which is a very good result for a software update on the CPU side. The same couldn't be said about Ratchet & Clank, sadly, as the update did basically nothing at all, and all results are within the margin of error, with the fastest CPU here being the 7900X 3D. And almost the same applies to Forza Horizon 5, although this game does seem to bring some increases in the 1% lows with both the 5800X 3D and 7900X 3D, meaning that the 3D cache CPUs might benefit a bit from the branch prediction update in this title, because after all, a 5 to 7% increase in the 1% lows is always well received with arms wide open. Credits to Creed. But Banishers Ghost of New Eden is the opposite, where the 9900X and the 5800X 3D get exactly the same results, and the fastest CPU, the 7900X 3D, gets worse FPS with Windows 11 24/2 versus the 23/2. And again, I retested this scenario and was the same, sadly. Dota 2 doesn't bring anything new as well, with all the results being within the margin of error, being it Windows 11 23/2 versus 24/2, or even just the update. The results were very solid even in a gameplay benchmark, so it is what it is, I guess. And as we go into Assetto Corsa, we have once again some odd results, with the 7900X 3D losing a bit of performance, the 5800X 3D gaining a bit, and the 9900X having a 5% increase from 137 to 144. having also a 10% increase in the 1% lows, which is great for the 9900X, but not so great for the 7900X 3D. In Rainbow Six Extraction, we did get a small performance uplift as well, with all CPUs, nothing really relevant of course, with the biggest improvement being like 4% for the 7900X 3D, but again, very welcomed performance. Hitman 3 delivers around the same results with the 9900X and 5800X 3D as well, in terms of performance uplifts, but it does deliver a performance increase with the 7900X 3D. Not much of course, but I mean, it's 5% after all, so 5% more performance for free. And this happens while Far Cry 6 is only delivering better performance for the 7900X 3D, going from a lower 155 to 167, translating into an 8% performance increase. Hogwarts Legacy brings more favorable results though, with the 7900X 3D getting a 16% increase in the 1% lows and the 9900X getting a 19% increase in the 1% lows and 6% increase in the averages as well. Very good results for Hogwarts Legacy players. As for Black Myth Wukong, well, it is an extremely GPU-heavy title, but still, I wanted to try and see how the different versions of Windows would fare. But I guess the differences, are all within the margin of error, so you can reject humanity and return to Monkey. And finally, another juicy result with Gears 5, one of the games that showed to have the biggest improvements across the board in all benchmarks around the internet, and here we got a 9% increase for the 9900X, and 13% increase for the 7900X 3D. Although the 9900X did get a way bigger 1% lows performance increase of 18%. Very nice. Ghost of Tsushima was also tested and retested, and we did get a slight performance increase with both the 7900X 3D and 9900X, even though it was a mild one of course. But that was about it, performance increase for free. As for Horizon Zero Dawn, it seems the 1% lows weren't that good before with the most recent CPUs, don't really know why, but what we got after the update was basically slightly higher averages, and much higher 1% lows that finally made these CPUs surpass the 5800X 3D in that regard. And yeah, I even tested GTA 5 online, and I know that this game is really hard to test on the online mode, but I tested it in the same exact way, just storming out of my building and running across town at the same time of the day. And the results could be seen as margin of error, of course, with all CPUs delivering around the same performance, with just a bit better one for the 7900X 3D it seems. And the final one is Need for Speed Unbound, that alongside Jedi Survivor simply didn't boot on Windows 24 Half 2. Tried several machines and several configurations, even with an Nvidia card for example, and it simply didn't boot. Might be EA's or Microsoft's issue, who knows, but it wasn't working. As for the averages of the 28 games tested, the performance increase is very mild, in this case 3% with the 9900X and not even 2% with the other CPUs, which is far from what we saw online. And then I decided to give it another shot, and man, listen and watch this. And well, even after spending lots and lots of hours benchmarking these 28 games on 3 CPUs, I thought to myself, why are my results so different from the other reviewers? Is there something going on? Am I doing something wrong? So I went and clean installed again Windows 11 23 Half 2, the current official installation, and updated to the branch prediction update.
Thank you, kind sir.
And as soon as I started testing some games, I said to myself, shit, now I have to retest everything again.
Why?
Just because I saw some really huge performance boosts with the 7900X 3D, and mates, this is not due to the chipset drivers per se, because I clean installed Windows with all the bells and whistles that I usually do, clean driver installation and also clean chipset driver installation, because a couple of weeks ago I started using also Revo Uninstaller to clean install the chipset drivers as well. I used the software for a long time but never thought of clean installing chipset drivers using that, but I now did. So clean installation for the GPU drivers and for the chipset drivers as well, and even then I got these results. In World War Z, we immediately see the 3D cache being properly used now on the 7900X 3D, delivering an 11% increase in performance, which is quite nice, with the 9900X delivering a much smoother experience overall compared to the clean installation of Windows 11 24/2. But as we go into Plague Tale Requiem, the 3D cache isn't used as much, but still, both CPUs delivered slightly higher 1% lows compared even to the 24/2 that already had a small performance bump, so a performance uplift on top of another performance uplift, which is great to see. Although Counter-Strike 2 is an outlier here, with the 9900X getting even more performance, but with the 7900X 3D slightly losing averages and losing 1% lows by quite a lot. Somehow, dual CCD CPUs with 3D V-cache seem to be way more sensitive to some different scenarios. As we go into Cyberpunk 2077, man, it seems like the 3D V-cache finally started working properly, and on top of the previous boost that we had another 17% performance increase in the averages, going from 137 to 160 FPS, which is a massive increase CPU-sided. And while Spider-Man doesn't bring massive increases, it does bring more benefits for both CPUs as well in terms of averages, but most importantly in terms of 1% lows, with Windows 11 23/2 update delivering a much smoother gameplay, with and without ray tracing, because even though the averages didn't move much with it, the 1% lows increased as well. Starfield, on the other hand, seems to be the second outlier here, as it seems to be delivering lower performance with the newer updates, somehow, being it Windows 11 24/2 or 23/2 updated, which is kind of odd, but I tested this several times and it still applies. The same way that it applies to The Last of Us, that alongside Starfield and Counter-Strike 2 are the biggest outliers so far, usually losing a bit of performance. As for The Witcher 3, it also brings some mild improvements overall for both CPUs, but especially for the 7900X 3D, where it increases the average FPS by 2.5% over Windows 11 24/2 and 4.4% over the older Windows 11 23/2 update, which is far from bad. And with Microsoft Flight Simulator, we have again a performance uplift for these CPUs, a 2% increase for the 9900X, which is very small, but a 6% increase in the averages for the 7900X 3D. We did have lower 1% lows somehow, but still higher than the results from the previous 23/2 test, so maybe that's a 24/2 thing. And in Assetto Corsa we have another massive performance increase, where we went from 147 to 170 FPS, which translates into a 16% performance increase, and most importantly, a huge 42% increase in the 1% lows, which is insane. Once again, I believe that this patch alongside with another clean installation might have made the 3D cache work better, as in the previous tests I saw the 7900X 3D using only the first CCD with 3D cache, but it was occasionally using some other cores from the second CCD as well, while now it was basically only on the first CCD, leading to a bigger performance, I suppose. And again, I did use Revo Uninstaller to uninstall the chipset drivers properly, kind of a clean installation, so that wasn't the case. I guess a clean installation of Windows again just made things better. But Far Cry 6 didn't really care about that. We did not see any performance uplifts. In a matter of fact, the performance even decreased slightly. So I guess it's kind of a luck of the draw. And they decreased slightly only to get increased again in Hogwarts Legacy, where the results were the same for the 9900X, but we had once again a 4% performance increase, with the 7900X 3D, that makes it now faster than the 9900X in this title. As for Gears 5, I was actually expecting much more performance out of it, since the other games did increase the performance as well, but it seems that it didn't happen and we actually lost 1% lows, meaning that the 3D cache was already being properly used here, or that the game doesn't really use the 3D cache properly at all. As for Ghost of Tsushima, we have the 9900X losing a bit of performance somehow, but with the 7900X 3D again delivering better results, being 7% faster than Windows 11 23.2 without the branch prediction update. Horizon Zero Dawn got virtually the same results across the board, with both Windows 11 24.2 and 23.2 updated, meaning that things were already working fine with this game. And to finish, Need for Speed Unbound didn't run at all with Windows 11 24.2 like I stated before, but with the update we have around the same results and it kind of runs, with the 9900X being the fastest CPU here of course, but not by much. And with these 16 games averages, we can see that now both CPUs got around a 5% performance increase, with the 7900X 3D being much faster in some case scenarios like Cyberpunk 2077 and Assetto Corsa, which was awesome to see, but also being slightly slower in others, like Counter-Strike 2 or Starfield. I guess it's kind of a trade-off. And as you saw, even though we lost performance in some titles, we did get a huge performance increase in some others with the 7900X 3D, especially in Cyberpunk 2077, Assetto Corsa, or even, let's say, Microsoft Flight Simulator or Hogwarts Legacy. And I do believe there are more games that will benefit a lot with the CPU being properly handled right now. But some things changed as the 9900X overall had more 1% lows as well, meaning that it wasn't only for the 7900X 3D, or it wasn't only the 7900X 3D that benefited, and people that are going for the Windows 11 24.2, if they really want that performance, they should consider doing a clean installation of Windows 11 23.2 and then do the branch prediction updates, and you'll have at the same time the same performance or even better in CPU-driven scenarios while having a much more stable system. Because as I stated in the beginning, we do have some problems with Windows 11 24.2, maybe mostly some quality of life problems, like for example when I updated from the version that I installed, the release candidate, or basically the preview, the insider preview, something like that, I did upgrade Windows again, or update, I didn't upgrade, I updated Windows again, and then the taskbar just got inverted colors somehow. And that happens on both computers, so it's a thing from the updates. Maybe that's what messed up with the Windows 11 24.2 results in the first hand, I don't really know. And we had some other issues that happened on both my AMD and Nvidia systems. Doesn't really matter the system, it still happens. Some EA app games like Jedi Survivor and Need for Speed Unbound won't boot with the Windows 11 24.2, and that may happen to more games, so if you're playing games, just stick with Windows 11 23.2, especially now that we got the branch prediction update to that version as well. And with this all said, I also wanted to test a scenario where we have, let's say, the usual or the updated Windows 11 23.2 with a branch prediction update versus a dirty installation of the Windows 11 24.2, basically just updating through Windows Update or just downloading the ISO and then updating to Windows 11 24.2 from your current Windows installation without deleting anything, basically like that, just an update. I wanted to know what the performance would be. And for this test I used the Ryzen 7 9700X and an RTX 4080 Super to see how the RTX 4080 Super would fare as well. And even though we got higher 1% lows with Gears 5, we also got lower averages, which might happen with a dirty update. And the same happened of course with Counter-Strike 2, that delivered slightly lower results in the averages and 1% lows. Not much difference of course, but still lower FPS. With Hogwarts Legacy being the first game to deliver virtually the same averages, but 7% more 1% lows, which is a win for people playing this game. As for Ghost of Tsushima, well, it also benefits a little, and even though both systems have the same branch prediction updates, Windows 11 24.2 does have better FPS, which is cool to see. On the other hand, The Witcher 3 loses a bit of performance in the averages, but, well, gets it back in the 1% lows, which kind of levels the scales here, I guess. So this means that Windows 11 24.2 might have some more things under the hood compared to the Windows 11 23.2, even with a branch prediction update. That's maybe what led to better performance in some scenarios or better 1% lows in some scenarios, even with a dirty installation that as usual is not advised. But still, my opinion is to just get or clean install, if possible, clean install Windows 11 23.2. update to the branch prediction update, basically the latest optional update, and call it a day. It will perform really well generally, and it will still be much more stable than the Windows 11 24/2. Just my 2 cents. And well guys, that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. This video took ages to make, and I'm so happy to finally get rid of it and give you the results finally, to kind of start testing new things, start doing new things, because I was kind of stuck on this video for a couple of days, let's say like 4 days or maybe more than that. So I was really eager to make the video and show the results to you guys. So thank you very much. If you can, and if you really enjoyed the video, or if you thought the results were interesting, leave your comment in the comment section, and please like and share the video, as it really helps a lot the channel. And before, I actually had my brother helping me, but now he's working, and well, I have to do everything by my own once again. So things are getting tougher, but yeah, I guess I'll be able to handle it. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video, guys. Cheers.